of the $2,000 stimulus checks, and what do we need to know going forward? Hey everyone, me Kevin here. By now, many of us know that the House of Representatives passed a CASH Act, which would have provided $2,000 instead of $600 to adults and children dependents, and $2,000 checks to adult dependents, including seniors and college students. This bill passed the House of Representatives with 44 Republican votes in favor of the $2,000 checks, following Donald Trump's demand that we get $2,000 stimulus checks ASAP. At the same time as Donald Trump demanded $2,000 checks, he also worked to raise campaign funds, pardon individuals, and demand changes to Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act to limit the power of websites like Twitter or YouTube to moderate or censor or even flag content with immunity from liability. Basically, platforms like Twitter and YouTube could get sued more easily if Section 230 reforms were repealed. Donald Trump then signed the $600 stimulus check package after having delayed the signing of this for 6 days while he was demanding $2,000 checks. But he signed with the understanding that the House was passing $2,000 checks, that the amendment was already passing, the bill to amend the checks to $2,000 was already going through the House, and that the Senate was going to pick up the $2,000 checks as well as potentially look into Section 230 changes and opening a commission to look into the November election. Well, when Mitch McConnell and the Senate, after all, had to go back to work to override the president's veto of the National Defense Authorization Act, naturally, the $2,000 stimulus checks came into focus. As Mitch McConnell said. Mitch McConnell introduced a bill that did just that. He introduced a separate bill that would provide $2,000 checks to adults, maintain $600 to children dependents, and provide no money for adult dependents, but it would have been $2,000 checks. Except along with his bill, he demanded that Section 230 just be repealed, which was seen as a poison pill for Democrats, something they could never vote for, which means this bill would have never gone anywhere, and of course opening a commission to look into the November election. Well, during the super rare New Year's session of Congress, in the Senate, Democrats and Republican Josh Hawley made the case for $2,000 checks to Americans, including many posters from Bernie Sanders to prove why stimulus checks for Americans are more important than corporate tax refunds to Amazon or Chevron or IBM and tax breaks for the wealthy. The leader of the Democrats in this case, an unlikely ally, Donald Trump. In every discussion, in every speech by Democrats mention they don't agree with Donald Trump on much, but they agree that we need $2,000 for the people, and here they are to make it happen. But Republicans rejected the $2,000 check idea, and Mitch McConnell, the person with the sole power to bring up the $2,000 check bill, vowed not to bring up a standalone $2,000 check bill unless he got Section 230 repealed and an election commission to look into the 2020 election. Mitch McConnell said that the $2,000 check bill was socialism for rich people, and he cited a widely circulated article from the Washington Post. And this was a Washington Post editorial board piece where the Washington Post, which generally does lean left, decried the fact that $2,000 stimulus checks are a bad idea, mostly because the stimulus check would phase out completely only for families of 5 earning above $350,000, basically paving the way for higher six-figure earners making over $200,000 or even over $300,000 to receive stimulus checks based on how many children they had. This was a big issue for Republicans. Now, Democrats apparently failed to realize that not limiting the checks to people making under a certain amount would be so politically unpopular. Democrats could have easily realized this and said, hey, we've got a hard stop at $200K. The phase-out starts at $150, but nobody over $200K gets it. Heck, if they wanted to make it very targeted like Republicans demand, they could have just stopped it at if you make more than $100,000 or more than $99,000, you don't get it. And then there would have been no six-figure argument to be made by Republicans. However, Democrats held to their position. no, we won't make any changes. It's $2,000 stimulus checks with no income limit other than the phase out that exists, which is $5 per $100 you make over $150,000, which unfortunately means that yes, a family making $350,000 with 4 children would receive a $2,000 stimulus check, which was a very good way to piss off Republicans. After all, here's how that math works. You can see that here. 4 children, 2 adults, that's 6 people getting $2,000 checks, that's $12,000. The limit for couples is $150K. Taking off the phase out, that equals $10,000, which means the $350,000 family still gets $2,000 stimulus checks. Hence, very, very politically unpopular for Republicans. Now, Bernie Sanders argued this isn't an issue. You're only talking about the top 5% of earners getting maybe 1% of the benefits, that this just isn't a big deal. However, some say that even if there were an income limit, Republicans wouldn't have gone for the $2,000 anyway, that this lack of a limit was really just a clever and convenient excuse. Now, Bernie Sanders set himself up as the hero to be. He said he would delay a vote on the NDAA override unless $2,000 stimulus checks were brought to the floor. The last time he did this was while we were negotiating the $600 checks, and he said he will refuse to not object to a stimulus package that does not include substantial payments to families. And so, when it came time to pass the $600 check bill in the Senate, Bernie Sanders did object. However, he said, you know what, the $600 is a good start, and he withdrew his objection. But this time he promised he would filibuster the veto override of the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, until the $2,000 stimulus checks were brought to the floor. Unfortunately, despite all efforts by Schumer and Bernie Sanders, both of them tried to object. They failed. They did not filibuster, which would have meant Bernie Sanders could have literally taken the next 12 to 24 hours of floor time and stood there to talk about whatever he wanted, just to put the pressure and the screws on Mitch McConnell to fight for those $2,000 checks. Unfortunately, when the moment came for Bernie Sanders to veto the invoking of cloture, which ends debate, Bernie Sanders did not object. When it came time for the cloture vote, cloture was called, and the Senate moved to overturn the NDAA by a vote of 81 to 13. Well, Bernie Sanders has just released a statement reacting to Senate Republicans' refusal to provide a unanimous consent motion for either a vote on the $2,000 bill passed by the House or even Mitch McConnell's own proposal. The Senate refused to bring either $2,000 check bill to the floor, which only Mitch McConnell has the power to do. Bernie Sanders said, over the past 4 days, I've asked time and time again for Republican leadership to allow the Senate to vote on a bill to provide $2,000 direct payments to the working class adults and their children. It would have also provided that to adult dependents. This legislation that Trump supports, Biden supports, and over 2/3 of the U.S. House supported, including 44 Republicans. In fact, a recent poll suggests that 78% of American people support that approach as well. Unfortunately, Mitch McConnell and Republican leadership have refused to allow the Senate to vote on this bill, even when accompanied by a vote on the bill which they themselves proposed. AKA, Bernie Sanders is saying no votes were possible even on the bill that Mitch McConnell brought up, which kind of begs the question, was Mitch McConnell's bill that he brought up just a showpiece to say, well, we wrote a bill for $2,000 checks, but the Democrats didn't want it? Who knows? But the point is, he gives us a little bit of a path forward. He says, at a time when so many Americans are facing economic desperation, it is tragic that the Republican leadership has turned their backs on working families of this country. When the Biden administration assumes office, the Senate must immediately take up and pass bold legislation which deals with the economic pain that so many Americans are experiencing. Unfortunately, there is no indication in Bernie Sanders' letter here that bold legislation includes $2,000 stimulus checks. All it says is we tried to get $2,000, we failed. Bernie Sanders did not turn into Bernie filibusters busters, and he did not push as much as he could. Maybe he realized it was futile. But the point is, the $2,000 stimulus checks, at least for the time being, have died. Now, looking forward, it is possible that on January 5th, Democrats end up taking control of the Senate, and it is possible the $2,000 checks could come up again. That vote is in just 4 days. Now, as much as I want to see the $2,000 stimulus checks, it's important to remember this. Republicans voting in Georgia might also agree with $2,000 stimulus checks, But you have to remember, Republicans in Georgia who are casting their vote for either a Republican or a Democratic senator, they're not just voting on $2,000 checks, they're also voting on their personal beliefs on things like Medicare for all, higher or lower taxes, more Democratic priorities, more Republican priorities. There are a lot of aspects that are on the ballot in Georgia. So while I support the $2,000 checks, it is going to be up to Georgians to determine whether Mitch McConnell leads the Senate, which means $2,000 stimulus checks probably won't happen, or whether Chuck Schumer will lead it, in which case $2,000 stimulus checks become very possible.